We strive for happiness, to find love, and to navigate through the disappointments of life without losing hope of finding our perfect match. Every relationship is a valuable experience, and we firmly believe that with a new partner, we will not repeat past mistakes. However, fate often throws unexpected challenges our way. I've known my ex-wife since high school, and immediately after reaching adulthood, we got married. A few years later, our daughter Polina was born. Being young and impulsive, we frequently quarreled without seeking solutions. Eventually, my wife became discontented with everything and constantly nagged. I tried to ignore her constant complaints, but it reached a point where I started spending less time at home. On our 10th wedding anniversary, my ex-wife surprised me with a divorce, and both of us breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, my relationship with our daughter remains strong, and we see each other often. Meeting Lena was a true revelation. I had forgotten that relationships could be so effortless. Our connection grew quickly, and she introduced me to her son. Lena had given birth to her son during a common-law marriage when she was just over 20 years old. However, his father, being controlled by his overbearing parents, left Lena when she became pregnant. Although the father occasionally visits and provides child support, Lena doesn't particularly rely on the financial assistance. Living in a prestigious neighborhood in a luxurious apartment with a decent car, her parents provide for her, while she also works remotely, developing design projects. Our relationship lasted for over a year, and I often visited Lena at her home. We had plans to live together, and I was seriously considering proposing to her. I quickly established a bond with her 5-year-old son, Anton. We often played games and had fun together. However, Anton had never met my daughter, and I wanted to change that. Finally, the perfect opportunity arose for them to meet. Lenusia, Polinka's friend from school, was on vacation and wanted to spend a week with me. I took the opportunity to express my feelings to her and suggested we go out together. However, Lenusia seemed hesitant and unsure about the idea of spending time with other people's kids. Sensing her uncertainty, I decided not to press the matter and assured her that we could try another time when she felt more comfortable. I knew that my daughter, Polichka, was very open-minded and had a close relationship with her, often sharing secrets and teenage problems. Unfortunately, time passed by quickly, and I forgot to reach out to Lenusia. Occasionally, I would send her a message on WhatsApp, feeling guilty for neglecting our relationship. One day, when Polichka wanted to visit her grandmother, I decided to stop by Lenusia's house with my daughter. As I arrived at the front door, I was surprised to be greeted by a respectable man instead of Lenusia. He seemed puzzled but welcomed me inside. In the meantime, Polichka enthusiastically addressed him, thinking I was Lenusia's friend Igor. Confused, I introduced myself to the man as Oleg Borisovich. Polichka eagerly urged us to play, and we followed her into the room. I was completely taken aback. Lenusia's father, but he was twice her age. I couldn't believe that this could be Lenusia's partner, a spineless mama's boy, as I initially assumed. Trying to be a good sport, I spent some time keeping the child company before we turned on cartoons. Later in the kitchen, Lenusia's father, Oleg Borisovich, and I had a serious conversation where I learned a lot of new things about Lenusia and her choice of partner. Lena and Oleg Borisovich crossed paths during a business trip he took to our city. Lena, a young and captivating woman, enchanted him with her wit and audacity, leading to a passionate affair. However, when she revealed her pregnancy, Oleg found himself at a crossroads. He had no intentions of leaving his wife, who he had spent his whole life with and with whom he had raised their 2 daughters. I covered all of her expenses every month, Igor, but I knew deep down that I couldn't keep her by my side. He confessed, his confusion evident. If Lena had wanted to get married, I would have let her go and continued supporting her and our child. After her heartbreaking admission, I felt a sense of remorse and ended up giving her more money as a way to make amends. As I listened, I gradually began to understand the true nature of the situation. "I see," I nodded, trying to comprehend the complexities at play. Our conversation was interrupted by the intercom bell, and in a rush, Antashka answered the door. Soon, she was surrounded by bags from high-end stores, an unmistakable glow on her face, at least until she caught sight of me. I silently rose from my seat and walked away. For a long time, I struggled to come to terms with everything that had unfolded. I even attempted to rationalize Lena's actions, questioning why she hadn't been upfront from the beginning, or whether she had doubted my feelings. In the end, however, I realized that it wasn't about me. Lena simply didn't want to lose her wealthy father figure. The atmosphere in the apartment spoke volumes. Candles on the table, empty champagne bottles, a disheveled bed, all indicators of a passionate encounter. It was clear that this intelligent woman had no intention of bidding farewell to her former lover. A month later, a phone call confirmed my suspicions. "Hello," Lena's voice was soft and uncertain. "How have you been?" "Hi," I responded, trying to maintain composure. "I'm doing well. I'm happy for you," she exhaled. "But I'm not in a good place. I truly believed that we could have a real family with a loving father figure that Antashka so desperately needed. And then you just disappeared without any explanation. Anton really misses you." She let out a sigh before adding, "Please say hello to your son." I decided that I didn't want to engage in this conversation any further. I understood all too well that this woman was simply trying to have the best of both worlds. "No need," I replied calmly. It was clear to me that her intentions were self-serving. The mask of hypocrisy fell, revealing her true nature in all its glory. I left my mother. Oleg stopped providing me with the same amount of financial support as before, or buying everything my son asks for. "Now I have no choice but to work," she shouted angrily. I chose not to prolong this pointless discourse. My disdain for her grew due to her lies and materialistic mindset. She had lost a loving man, and I held no judgment for the past. I could have easily embraced her child as mine own. The truth always surfaces, and relationships built on deception are doomed from the start. Dear friends, thank you for listening to our stories. Subscribe to the channel, put likes, and leave your opinion in the comments. Don't forget to press the bell not to miss new stories, which we try to publish every day. We also remind you that everyone can share unique stories from their life or the lives of friends, which can be sent to us by email, which is specified in the description of the video. Good luck to everyone and be happy!